So Bob Saget is a very important issue to the community. And I don't know about you, but I love to get answers. Real, true, lasting answers on the Bob Saget case. So that is exactly what we have coming up next, right here on JTC channel. Look forward to it. So the bottom line with one of these key crime scene outlines and issues is it showcased how easily the actual crime scene for Bob Saget was physically staged. And it appears very, very likely that it was deliberately staged. And so this video will be very brief, but it will hit on these, extremely important highlights. It says John Meyer retrieves Bob Saget's Toyota Prius. So when they were going through with the butler, similar issues were coming up. John Meyer proved to be one of the good ones as he went with Jeff Ross, it states, to retrieve Bob Saget's Toyota Prius from the LAX airport. Less than a few months ago, Bob Saget was the star for Jay Leno's Garage, where he had the opportunity to be behind the Apocalypse Hellfire, which is a type of new Japanese car. Tom Hanks had owned one, and so did Ryan Gosling, Cameron Diaz, Julia Roberts, Jeff Goldblum, Danny DeVito, and Leonardo DiCaprio. When Bob Saget passed away, John Meyer and Jeff Ross helped out and went to retrieve the actual Prius from the LAX International Airport. They shot a 25-minute tribute video, and they officially showed how it got into the location. He added how the Prius was Saget's junk car, his go-to option, in other words, for day-to-day activity. Over the years, Saget owned several Lexus LS models, each from a different generation. Bob Saget's Prius had been at LAX for only 3 days, and the parking ticket turned out to be $250. The parking company was unreceptive to help Meyer and Ross, as they claimed that they would let them go if it were John Stamos' car. Saget co-starred on Full House. However, luckily, Meyer and Ross sorted everything out. So it's very interesting that they found the car in a totally different part of the whole road trip. Very interesting. And so, what do I ultimately believe about Bob Saget's situation overall? In keeping this video, timely and under a certain time limit, I just wanted to point out I do believe that Bob Saget's death has a lot to do with Kelly Rizzo, most likely, and certainly other factors are involved and have been since the very beginning. One of the key factors that I suspect and that I've always suspected and kind of speculated upon is the comedy club itself. There is more involving the Bob Saget case all the way along, including the homicide and the actual comedy club that Mr. Saget was known to frequent and visit all the way along up until his untimely death. And he visited it apparently in West Hollywood, right here, downtown California, as well as that same comedy club, in other words, another part of this chain, in Florida. And I've always held that that is suspicious for some reason. And I see the links between that and possibly what was going on with Miss Rizzo. And when examining that, I see some very causal links to certain people, such as Penn Jillette, and the fact that they would follow Mr. Saget quite often or frequently on these trips whenever he would attend his local comedy club to be able to put on the shows. So I felt like there was something going on and some kind of power dynamic or power struggle. And right there, that is where I will leave that for now. There's much more to explore. Thank you. Body cam footage is still being released. It shows issues in the hotel room that are needing to be examined by forensic teams. The Ritz-Carlton hotel room showed only a few signs of Bob Saget being present in the room, and police were not able to determine based on current photos what could have hit Bob Saget on his head. His cause of death was ruled as blunt force trauma. Still, some of the photos are a little haunting. A partial body impression can be seen on the bed that his body was removed from. On the nightstand, his cell phone and tablet were charging officially. He also had 2 bottles of water, his glasses, and lip balm. Elsewhere around the room, Bob Saget had a jacket essentially hanging on the closet door and a pair of shoes on the floor. A discarded N95 mask was in the trash bin. In the bathroom, a comb as well as special deodorant sat on a shelf right above the sink. Towels in the shower indicated the actor may have used it briefly, though there was no indication he had struck his head. The images came out only a week after Bob's estranged wife, Kelly Rizzo, and their 3 daughters were granted an injunction to block the release of certain critical photographs. The entire Saget family is grateful that the judge had granted the request for an injunction to preserve Bob's dignity as well as privacy rights. Also recently released was an incident report by Chief Medical Examiner Joshua Stefani, who performed Bob's autopsy results. Dr. Stefani claimed the injury was most likely caused by something hard, covered by something soft. He also stated with no definitive way of proof that he believed it was within hours of his death, probably 1 or 2 days at most, depending on medical factors. So there clearly was more than a few medical factors involved with this, because it could not have been so simple now that we know about the butler and we know about people going into that room. Thank you very much. Continue getting the word out there on this case. So, I don't know about you guys. However, from where I'm standing, it's starting to be very, very clear, crystal clear in fact, that Bob Saget's untimely demise was in fact foul play, to be exact. Cops claim and state that the actor cracked his skull on the bedroom's headboard, but New York-based Dr. Stuart Fisher pointed out there were 6 fractures on the back and the front of Saget's cranium. You would have to fall 10 to 20 feet or be battered by a blunt object to suffer injuries of this kind at any time. It is beyond suspicious and screams of a crime scene to me. Famed forensic pathologist Dr. Cyril Wecht, who helped investigate the deaths of Senator Robert F. Kennedy, the Charles Manson cult victim Sharon Tate, and rock legend Elvis Presley, expresses doubts over the Florida coroner's ruling of accidental death. If his death came from a fall, it had to come from multiple falls, Wecht says at a exclusive National Enquirer interview. on the event. There's no way he simply fell and hit his head and died. This case is crying out for investigation in many areas. His former co-star, Candace Cameron Bure, agrees. However, the funny man's shattered widow, Kelly Rizzo, and her grown daughters Aubrey, Lara, and Jennifer Saget won a court fight to block the Orange County Medical Examiner's office from releasing the further details about the death. They insist that revealing more information about this investigation causes irreparable harm in the form of extreme mental anguish, pain, and distress. But former NYPD officer and criminal DA Peter Gleason says any findings that come out need to remain public, no matter what. While I understand the family's desire for privacy, any time there is a suspicious death in a public place such as a hotel, a public investigation is critical because of the public's right to know. And he's indeed correct. The right to know everything is something that's built into the actual bedrock of our Constitution and similar things. Our laws would not exist. I will say that right now. Especially in the way they are set up, they would not exist without the right to know and the right to have proper, appropriate public discourse. Freedom of speech. That is a key element to everything our society has always been based upon and what it was built up upon and built off of. Bob Saget performed a show the night before his death in the Jacksonville area and later arrived at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel. Wecht insists I would want to review every moment that could have been captured on security camera from the time he got in his car in Jacksonville until he went to his hotel room in Orlando. Did he stop for gas? Did he stop to eat somewhere? Did anyone seem to follow him in the lobby or even the parking lot? Was the door actually locked? All of this should have been examined and detailed before the cause of death was even determined. Lawmen consulted by the Inquirer believe the swift investigation was superficial, at best, and the hotel room was neatly staged to support a preposterous theory that the body stand-up star was simply the victim of a fall. Former Chicago police officer and private investigator Paul Hubel says, I am not satisfied his significant head trauma could happen without someone else's help. Gleason questions the tidy appearance of Bob Saget's large room and canopy. A housekeeper discovered the dead comic's bags were neatly placed by the door, something that is unheard of in anything other than a murder, as he was lying in bed. Gleason states the last thing a major chain like the Ritz-Carlton would want is to have a homicide occur on their private property. A tidied-up hotel room makes for a difficult crime scene to investigate. He notes that hotels and tourist destinations like Orlando frequently experience break-ins and burglaries. These are the places where security footage should be checked. First thing. Statistics show theft, burglary, and assaults account for most, if not 90%, of Orlando City's crimes, with the majority occurring near hotels, bars, and restaurants. And that is, of course, the case. Let's look back at what's gone on with the Gabby Petito escapade. We know this is how things work. So thank you again. I'm going to be speaking to you guys personally here and kind of having a fireside chat a little bit in this new update to the Bob Saget case. And I will also be letting you know that, yes, in the near future, although I can't tell you exactly when, because they're having to redo the dollar system and similar things, but in the near future, there's going to be a new device, a new camera, everything always needs to be very up to date. So I will say that that's being followed up very, very closely. And things will be resolved how they need to be done. And so I thank you again. He did not fall. We know Bob Saget, that he was murdered. So I appreciate you continuing to get this out here, get it out far and wide, and this is also going to the general public, of course, and getting out to the general audience as well and starting to seep out there. Very, very important. And thank you. Thank you for being here. Right here, JTC channel. Thank you. So I'm keeping this in the respect of keeping this relatively short video, so this doesn't go above 20 minutes at all. This was very important. What was going on here at the comedy club when Bob Saget was doing his regular comedy shows is a very big key to the overall case. Bob Saget still brings laughs to one of the stand-up comedy meccas, the Comedy Store, which is hosted in West Hollywood, California. The iconic West Hollywood Club was packed with huge names every Sunday, including Chris Rock, Jim Carrey, Jackson Browne, John Mayer, John Stamos, and Jeff Ross. Bob's daughters Aubrey and Lara would always arrive here, and widow Kelly Rizzo gave the honorary tribute to Bob Saget at the Comedy Store official comedy club of West Hollywood. Now that is important because some folks have rightly suspected that Kelly Rizzo may have been involved in this ordeal in some way. So there's something very important that has to be really looked at about that. Not only did the night celebrate Bob Saget's life, but it served as a fundraiser for the Scleroderma Research Foundation, which was penned after his sister, who had died from this disease in 1994. Bob served on the board for the foundation and became a chairman and champion for awareness and research for scleroderma. Just last month, a few weeks before he passed, Bob told CBS he wanted to continue fighting scleroderma and make sure it gets out there to the rest of the world right before he died. Last night's event and several more to come ensure that this happens. And so in looking at this, this was the most important thing that kind of needed to be taken away from certain things. There was a man named Penn Jillette, and he used to be a very big reporter actually for the New York Post and also the New York Sun and New York Times. And he had a street address, interestingly, in the area right near West Hollywood. So it is confirmed now that it was Bob Saget's Toyota Prius that was recovered from this area. You can see this is kind of an interesting area because, of course, none of the cars, at least some of them off in the vacant lots, none of those are marked. And it was interesting because Penn Jillette, it was confirmed on the news articles, he would follow Mr. Saget's Toyota Prius. And once in a while that would go on where he would go backstage to see exactly what was happening there at the comedy club. And since he lived really only about 10 or 20 minutes from the comedy club officially, which is the West Hollywood Comedy Club, where Bob Saget would do all of his most, infamous performances, it's been speculated and started to be confirmed with some very groundbreaking evidence that Penn Jillette was also involved in this scenario in some way. He was following Bob quite regularly. He would follow his Toyota Prius, and apparently he was one of the few who knew where the Prius would end up stopping. So Mr. Penn Jillette was also a friend of the butler, and it is really unknown right now at this stage because of certain things having to truly be uncovered, whether or not he was a suspect, given that he lived about no more than 15, 20 minutes away from the comedy club, or whether he was simply a witness who may have noticed and witnessed some very key evidence and important information concerning the case. In any case, it was confirmed he did follow Bob Saget's Toyota Prius around during the time of these comedy shows, and it was done because he wanted. So, and that's always important because, of course, Mr. Jillette was very closely associated with Bob Saget, and he was following his Toyota Prius at the time because he'd want to be there to be the first one to do backstage gatherings and backstage reports and things like that. So Mr. Penn Jillette knew the exact route Saget would take to the comedy club, and he was also there quite often very early. So it's unknown still at the time whether he was truly involved or whether he was simply a witness, but it was confirmed that he was following that Toyota Prius, and that's one of the reasons why it was not able to be confirmed what happened to that Prius until later when John Mayer came across it and he brought it out of that ditch area. So I thank you again. There's a lot that we can learn from this case, this tragic case of one of our nation's greatest comedians. I truly enjoy Bob Saget's work a lot. I loved it. It has a special place in my heart, and so I hope all of you will continue spreading the word, most certainly on this case. Let's get this out to the mass general public, and let's get a lot more attention to the key issues of the comedy club and the comedy store. So thank you. Until next time, JTC.